What if Great Britain never ruled the world? No British Empire, no global trade dominance, no English as a world language, no democracy as we know it. Sounds peaceful, right? A world untouched by British colonial rule. A world where nations rise and fall without the guiding or suffocating hand of British imperialism. But here's the thing. Just because Britain isn't ruling the world doesn't mean history suddenly becomes a utopia. No, it just means someone else gets to do the conquering, and the backstabbing, and the world-wrecking. So what happens when Britain stays a small, rainy island instead of ruling a quarter of the globe? Well, buckle up, because history without the British Empire might be just as chaotic. Let's dive in. The Industrial Revolution that never happened, or did it? The Industrial Revolution turned Britain into a global powerhouse. It brought steam engines, mass production, and railroads, plus child labor, pollution, and an absolute disregard for workplace safety. Ah, progress. But what if Britain never led the charge? Without British industry, who takes the wheel? France, Germany, the Dutch? Or do we just remain stuck in a never-ending medieval period, churning butter and dying of curable diseases? Either way, someone would have figured out industrialization eventually. Human greed is great at finding new ways to make money, so whether it's German efficiency, American ambition, or French flair for dramatic revolutions, the Industrial Revolution would still happen. The real question is, does it happen later, or does someone else do it even faster? A world without British colonial rule. Britain never builds its empire. Cue global sigh of relief. No colonization, no oppression, no wealth extracted from distant lands. Finally, justice. Except wait. That doesn't mean the world suddenly becomes fair. It just means other countries get to do the exploiting instead. Does France become the dominant colonial superpower instead? Spoiler alert, they weren't exactly known for handing out democracy and hugs either. Does Spain hold on to its crumbling empire longer, dragging the Americas into further chaos? Or does China remain a dominant global power, shaping world trade instead of being force-fed opium by the British? History isn't nice. If the British aren't conquering the world, someone else is. The world without British rule isn't some decolonized paradise, it's just colonialism with a different accent. And then there's the small issue of democracy. Does democracy even take off? People love democracy. Well, at least until election season. And Britain was a major player in spreading parliamentary government around the world, even if they didn't exactly practice what they preached in their colonies. Without Britain, does democracy still spread? Maybe. Maybe the United States still becomes a democratic powerhouse. Or maybe, without British influence, it develops into something completely different. Imagine America without its Constitution, Bill of Rights, or obsession with freedom. Would they still fight for independence? Or would they just become Canada? Without Britain ruling India, does democracy take root there? Or does the region descend into a centuries-long Game of Thrones, minus the dragons? One thing's for sure, we take democratic systems for granted, but in this alternate timeline, they might not have been the default. No English as a global language? English is the world's go-to language for business, science, entertainment, and arguing on the internet. But without British rule, would that still be the case? Maybe French becomes the dominant global language, meaning the world sounds more elegant but takes twice as long to say anything. Maybe Mandarin dominates global business, and the West struggles with tones and thousands of characters. Or maybe, without a single dominant colonial power, the world remains a linguistic mess, forcing everyone to rely on hand gestures and interpretive dance to communicate. Imagine a world where there's no English in Hollywood movies, no Beatles, no Shakespeare. Now that's dark. And speaking of dark, let's talk war. World wars without Britain? The British played a critical role in both world wars. Without them, how do these conflicts unfold? World War I, without Britain in the mix, does Germany steamroll Europe? Or does the war never even happen, leaving Europe stuck in a perpetual standoff? World War II, without Britain holding the line against Nazi Germany, does Hitler take over Europe? Or does the US get dragged in earlier, skipping the "we'll sit this one out" phase? Or wild idea, maybe no world wars happen at all. Maybe Europe remains a tangled mess of small conflicts instead of global destruction. Maybe history takes a completely different path. Or maybe, and let's be honest, this is the most likely outcome, humanity just finds another reason to start a war. The superpowers that never rose, or rose even faster. Without Britain ruling the world, who fills the vacuum? Does the US still rise as a superpower, or does it remain a quiet, farm-loving backwater? Does China dominate Asia centuries earlier, shaping the future in ways we can't even predict? Does Germany take over Europe and become the dominant world force? Or maybe no single nation rises. Maybe the world remains a fractured mess of smaller competing powers, constantly at each other's throats. One thing's for sure, the global power structure of today would look nothing like it does in our reality. The final reality, better or worse. So what does this alternate world actually look like? The British Empire never rises, meaning global colonialism takes a different shape. Democracy as we know it may never take hold, or takes much longer to spread. English is not the dominant global language. Communication barriers shape world diplomacy. The Industrial Revolution happens later, or is led by a completely different nation. The world wars play out in unpredictable ways, maybe better, maybe far worse. Superpowers rise differently. China, Germany, or regional empires take Britain's place. Would this world be more peaceful? Maybe. More chaotic? Almost definitely. More entertaining? Absolutely. What do you think? Would the world be better without British rule, or just different? Would another empire have stepped in to fill the gap, or would history have taken a more peaceful turn? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, hit that like button if this alternate timeline made you think. Subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating what-if scenarios, and make sure to check out our next video, What If World War I Never Happened? See you there.